Rome, 1497. On the muddy banks of the Tiber River, a notorious dumping ground for the city's unwanted dead, fishermen haul a waterlogged lass ashore. The body belongs to a young man in his early 20s. He was stabbed 9 times, once in the throat, 8 across his head and legs. Yet he is still fully dressed in fine velvet, wearing his shoes and gloves. Tucked into his belt is a purse holding 30 gold ducats, entirely untouched. This is Giovanni Borgia. He is the captain general of the church, the Duke of Gandía, and the favorite son of Pope Alexander VI. The untouched gold shifts the nature of the crime from common theft to a calculated execution. In a single night, the most heavily guarded family in Renaissance Italy has been bled in the street, shattering their aura of invincibility. Giovanni had been handed the world. His father showered him with vast Spanish duchies, extravagant wealth, and the highest military commands in the Papal States. On the battlefield, however, he was a glaring liability, suffering embarrassing defeats and losing hundreds of men to rival Roman factions. When the news reaches the Vatican, Pope Alexander VI breaks down. He locks himself inside his private chambers, weeping bitterly for hours. For days, he refuses to eat or sleep, paralyzed by a grief shocking his entire court. That grief quickly turns to extreme paranoia. The Pope orders a massive, door-to-door search of every house along the banks of the Tiber. Guards interrogate nobles and servants alike. The search yields nothing. Investigators now face a crowded field of suspects. Giovanni's immense privilege and history of arrogance created a long list of enemies, each with their own motive to see the Pope's favorite son dead. Failing to immediately identify the killer creates a sudden information vacuum in Rome. The Borgias look entirely exposed, and the political vultures begin circling. To understand how a prince of the church could vanish, investigators retraced his final night. On the evening of June 14th, Giovanni attends a family dinner at his mother's house. After the meal, he rides back toward the papal palace, accompanied by his older brother, Cesare. Along the route, Giovanni makes a detour. He separates from his brother and rides off into the dark. He takes only his valet and a mysterious masked man, someone who had been visiting Giovanni almost daily for the past month. Arriving at a local Roman square, Giovanni dismisses his protective retinue. He orders his sole remaining servant to wait for him until 8 o'clock, and then vanishes into the narrow alleys with the masked figure. The next morning, that single servant is found bleeding out on the cobblestones. He is fatally wounded and dies before he can provide a single word about his fate. A new account emerges from a Slavonian timber dealer guarding his wood on the Tiber. Around 2 in the morning, he watched a rider on a white horse approach the riverbank. Flanked by 4 accomplices, the rider watched as they lifted a corpse from the animal and threw it into the river. The calculation required to lure Giovanni away, eliminate his witness, and coordinate the disposal team points to a high-level conspiracy. The initial investigation points toward the Orsini family. They are ancient, powerful Roman nobility, and they had just fought a brutal military campaign against the Borgias, defeating Giovanni in open battle. They had every reason to want him dead. Then there is the Sforza faction. Giovanni Sforza had recently been subjected to a public humiliation when the Pope forced him to divorce Lucrezia Borgia. Contemporary intelligence circulating in Spain claims Sforza executed the hit himself. The theory suggested he used a masked woman to lure the drunken duke to a rendezvous, avenging his shattered reputation. Both the Orsini and the Sforza possessed the resources, networks, and motives to execute a high-profile assassination. Yet the Pope explicitly clears the Orsini, desperate to prevent a wider Roman war. Meanwhile, Sforza's alibis hold up under intense scrutiny. While these political rivals certainly had the means, the fact that Alexander VI never exacted revenge implies something deeply disturbing. The killer was someone much harder to touch politically. The investigation then pivots to what historians call sordid gallantry. Giovanni was a notoriously reckless playboy, known for prowling the streets of Rome at night and pursuing dangerous affairs. City police begin raiding houses the Duke had visited in secret. They aggressively interrogate a local nobleman, Count Antonio della Mirandola, whose daughter Giovanni was allegedly seeing. The evidence starts pointing toward a crime of passion by a jealous family member. 9 months later, a leak upends the case. An intelligence dispatch from the Ferraris ambassador in Venice circulates, framing Giovanni's own brother, Cesare Borgia. According to the leak, Cesare's motives were intensely personal. He was reportedly consumed by jealousy over the Pope's obvious favoritism. The rumors cited dark, incestuous rivalries and an ambition to strip Giovanni of his military titles so Cesare could leave the priesthood and claim them for himself. This accusation shifts the entire narrative from a late-night street crime into a catastrophic family betrayal. When modern academic historians examine the timeline, that narrative falls apart. The consensus today is that the evidence against Cesare is entirely circumstantial. There is no contemporary proof placing him at the scene, and he almost certainly did not kill his brother. The historical record heavily supports the street-level reality. Giovanni's death was the result of a fatal encounter with an unknown personal enemy over a lover, an act of sordid gallantry that ended in the river. In the immediate aftermath, Pope Alexander was overwhelmed by guilt. Believing God was punishing him for his own sins, he established a commission of 6 cardinals and briefly attempted to reform the corrupt practices of the Church. That piety did not last. To avoid exposing the full reality of his dead son's private life to the public, the Pope quietly buried the commission's report and abandoned the murder investigation entirely. By choosing to hide the embarrassing truth to protect Giovanni's reputation, the Pope left the vacuum open. That single decision inadvertently doomed his family's legacy. That silence birthed the Black Legend. It became a centuries-long successful propaganda campaign engineered by political rivals to demonize the Borgias at every turn. Without an official culprit, enemies like the Venetians and later writers like Niccolò Machiavelli weaponized the unsolved cold case. They used the silence to frame Cesare Borgia as a mastermind who would slaughter his own blood for power. Centuries later, romantic novelists and dramatists adopted these unproven leaks, weaving them into stories that eventually hardened into accepted history. Giovanni Borgia commanded armies and held the wealth of the papacy, yet none of it could stop a coordinated narrative attack. It proves that in the theater of power, an unanswered question is the deadliest weapon of all. Because if you refuse to write the end of your own story, your enemies will gladly write it for you.